I don't check the time anymore. Time checks me. That's what happens when your life becomes a machine. Every move calculated, every word measured, every room already leaning in your direction before you even speak. You learn to control outcomes. You learn to read people faster than they understand themselves. You learn how to win without raising your voice. And at some point, it stops feeling impressive. It just becomes expected. There's this moment most nights. It's quiet, almost too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. I walk into my place, drop my keys on the table, and the sound echoes longer than it should. No music, no voices, no chaos, just stillness. And for a second, I stand there longer than necessary, not moving, not thinking, just listening to nothing, because that nothing feels honest. No one asking for decisions, no one waiting for direction, no one watching me to see if I slip. It's the only place where I don't have to perform, and that should feel like relief. But it doesn't. Here's the part no one prepares you for. When you build a life where everyone relies on you, you slowly lose the ability to rely on anyone else. Not because people aren't willing, because you stop trusting what it feels like to need. Needing something means there's a gap, a weakness, an opening someone could walk through, and I spent years sealing every opening I had. I remember when that started. It wasn't dramatic. No big betrayal, no cinematic heartbreak, just small moments stacking up. Times I reached out and got nothing back. Times I spoke honestly and saw it used against me later. Times I gave more than I should have and felt stupid for it. So I made a decision I never said out loud, never be the one who needs more. And I kept that promise, relentlessly. You ever notice how people admire strength, but only from a distance? Up close, it makes them uncomfortable, because real control isn't loud. It's quiet, detached, observing everything. And that kind of presence, it isolates you. People don't joke the same around you. They don't relax fully. They don't challenge you. They just adjust. And over time, you start wondering, do they respect me? Or are they just careful around me? That question doesn't leave easily. It follows you into conversations, into meetings, into rooms where everyone nods a little too quickly. It makes you second-guess compliments, makes you question loyalty. Because when you've built yourself into something unshakable, you don't know if anyone is there for you, or just what you represent. And that thought, that quiet, creeping doubt, it gets heavy. There's an uncomfortable truth I avoided for a long time. Power doesn't just attract people, it filters them. And sometimes, it filters out the ones who would have actually stayed. Because they don't compete for attention, they don't chase approval, they don't orbit around control. They just exist, and if you're always in motion, always calculating, always managing outcomes, you miss them, or worse, you push them away without realizing what they were. I told myself I liked it this way, clean, focused, efficient, no emotional distractions, no unpredictable variables, just results. But that's a half-truth, because late at night, when the noise disappears and the performance ends, there's a question that gets louder than everything else. And I've tried to ignore it. I've buried it under work, under goals, under constant movement, but it always finds its way back. Let me ask you something. When was the last time someone saw you, and you didn't feel the need to control how they saw you? Not impress them, not manage their perception, not stay one step ahead, just exist in front of them without strategy. Do you even remember what that feels like? Because I don't, or at least, I didn't. I got so used to being the one in control that I forgot what it meant to be understood without effort. And that's the part that started to scare me. Not the silence, not the loneliness, but the realization that I might not even recognize real connection anymore, even if it was right in front of me. And maybe that's where this really began, not with her, but with the version of me that had already decided control was safer than connection, even if it meant standing alone in a perfectly built life, with no one close enough to see what it was costing me. And the worst part? I wasn't even sure I wanted to change that yet, because the moment you loosen control, even slightly, something unexpected tends to slip through, and I didn't know if I was ready for what that might be. She didn't fall for me. She ignored everything I built to be fallen for. That's how I knew something was wrong. Everywhere else, it was predictable. People respond to presence, to certainty, to the way I carry silence like it's a weapon. They lean in, they adjust, they try to earn space. She didn't. The first time we sat across from each other, it wasn't even dramatic. No music, no tension you could point at, just a table, 2 glasses, low light cutting the room into shadows, and her, completely unaffected, not impressed, not intimidated, not performing. She looked at me the way people look at something familiar, not something powerful, and I didn't know what to do with that. I remember thinking, this won't last. Everyone reveals it eventually, the shift in tone, the subtle need to please, the way their words start orbiting your approval. But she didn't shift. If anything, she got quieter, more observant, like she wasn't trying to understand who I was showing her. She was trying to understand what I wasn't, and that felt invasive. Not in a loud way, in a quiet, precise way that made me feel exposed. Here's the part I didn't expect. I started editing myself, not for image, not for control, for her. I would pause mid-sentence, rethink how something sounded, catch myself before saying too much. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't managing perception anymore. I was protecting something I didn't even fully understand. You ever feel that? When someone's presence makes you more aware of your own silence? Not the comfortable kind. The kind where you realize there are things inside you that don't have words yet, and you're terrified they might ask for them. That's what she did, without trying. There was a night, late, colder than usual. The kind of cold that seeps into your hands even indoors. We were sitting in my place, no distractions, no noise except the faint hum of the city outside. She was on the couch, legs tucked under her, looking around like she was reading the room, not judging, reading. I poured 2 drinks, set one in front of her. She didn't touch it, just looked at me and said quietly, "You don't let people stay long, do you?" No accusation, no emotion, just observation. And I felt something tighten in my chest. Not anger, recognition. I could have deflected, made a joke, redirected the conversation like I've done 1,000 times before, but I didn't. And that hesitation, that brief pause where I didn't have control, it exposed more than any answer could, because in that silence, she already knew. That's when fear started creeping in, not the kind you run from, the kind that makes you stay still because moving might make it worse, because if she could see that, what else could she see? The parts I buried years ago, the moments I chose control over honesty, the times I walked away before someone could walk away from me. All of it. Right there. Close enough to be noticed. Uncomfortable truth? We don't push people away because they don't understand us. We push them away because they understand us too well, and understanding removes your ability to hide, and hiding is where I felt safe. I started testing her, subtle things, delayed responses, shorter answers, moments where I pulled back just enough to see if she'd chase. She didn't. She stayed consistent, present, but never reaching, and that messed with me more than anything, because I wasn't used to someone who didn't react to distance. It forced me into a corner I hadn't been in before. If she wasn't chasing, then why was she still there? What was she seeing that made her stay, without needing anything from me? That question didn't feel comfortable. It felt dangerous, because it suggested something I wasn't ready to accept. That maybe she wasn't there for what I built. Maybe she was there for something I hadn't shown anyone. Something real. And that's where the conflict started tearing at me. Part of me wanted to lean in, drop the guard, say something honest, let her see it fully, just once. But the other part, stronger, louder, kept reminding me what happens when you let someone too close. You lose control, and once you lose control, you don't get to decide how it ends. Let me ask you something. What scares you more, being alone or being fully seen by someone who might still choose to leave? Think about that carefully, because I thought I knew my answer, until I met someone who made both options feel equally terrifying. And here's the part I still don't fully understand. She never tried to break through my walls. She just stood there, patient, unmoved, unafraid of what I wasn't saying, like she knew something I didn't, like she was waiting for a version of me I hadn't decided to become yet. And maybe that's why I couldn't relax around her, because for the first time, it wasn't about whether I could keep someone, it was about whether I could handle being known, and I wasn't sure I could, not completely, not without losing something I wasn't ready to lose. But what I didn't realize then was that by holding on to control that tightly, I might have already started losing something else, something quieter, something I didn't notice slipping until much later. And by then, I wasn't the only one deciding anymore. Winning can feel like a drug, until the moment it stops numbing anything. That night should have been clean, perfect even. Everything aligned the way I designed it to. Decisions executed, numbers exactly where they needed to be. Conversations controlled before they even started. People left satisfied, impressed, predictable. I walked out of that day untouched, that's the word. untouched. It was late when I got back, the kind of night where the air feels heavier than usual, like something's waiting for you to notice it. I didn't turn on all the lights, just one, low, enough to see shapes, not details. My jacket stayed on longer than it should have. Keys still in my hand, I stood in the middle of the room, not moving, and there was no reason for that, no exhaustion, no stress, just a pause that didn't belong. You ever feel something shift? Without knowing what moved? That's what it was. Subtle, quiet, but wrong. I finally sat down, slowly, like I was buying time. The room felt bigger than usual, too much space, too much silence. I leaned back, eyes on the ceiling, and for the first time in a long time, nothing followed. No next move, no plan, no voice in my head telling me what to do next, just stillness, and that's when it hit. It wasn't a thought at first. It was a feeling, tight, heavy, like something pressing against my chest from the inside. I took a breath, then another. Didn't help. Because this wasn't physical. This was something else. Something I had been outrunning for years without realizing it. And then the questions started. Not loud, not dramatic, just clear. What if none of this actually means anything? I didn't react, didn't sit up, didn't shake it off. I just stayed there, staring at the ceiling like it might answer me. What if you've been building something, just to avoid looking at yourself? That one landed. Harder than it should have. Because there was no immediate defense. No logic, no counter, just silence. Pattern interrupt. Success doesn't always fill the void. Sometimes it just makes it quieter, so you can hear it better. I sat up, slow, my hands were steady, but something inside me wasn't. And I didn't like that. I don't do instability. I fix things, I control outcomes, I eliminate variables. But this had no shape, no clear cause, which meant I couldn't control it. I stood, walked a few steps, then stopped. The room felt unfamiliar, like I was in someone else's space. Same walls, same furniture, but the certainty I usually carried, gone, replaced by something I couldn't name. Uncomfortable truth? If you build your identity on always being the one who has it together, you don't know what to do the moment you don't. There's no protocol for that, no strategy, just exposure. I reached for my phone. Instinct, not for distraction, for direction. I scrolled without thinking. Names passed by, conversations, people, all of them, easy, all of them, surface level. Then I stopped. Her name. And everything slowed down, because in that moment, I knew exactly what I needed. Not advice, not validation, just her presence, her voice. Something real enough to cut through whatever this was. My thumb hovered, and that's when the conflict hit. Sharp, immediate. If you call, you can't hide. That thought wasn't emotional. It was precise, controlled, the part of me that built everything I had, stepping in to protect it. Because calling her wouldn't just be a conversation. It would be an admission that I wasn't okay, that I didn't have control in this moment, that everything I present to the world has cracks. And once you say that out loud, you can't take it back. So I sat there, phone in my hand, staring at her name like it was a decision point I wasn't ready to cross. Let me ask you something. When you're at your lowest, who do you think about calling? And more importantly, why don't you? Because that answer says more about you than anything you've achieved. I put the phone down, slowly, deliberately, like I was choosing something, and I was. I was choosing control, over connection, again. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, hands clasped, breathing steady, face calm. From the outside, nothing had changed, but inside, something had cracked, not broken, cracked, and cracks don't make noise, they just spread. I told myself it would pass, that this was temporary, just fatigue, just pressure catching up. I've handled worse, I've pushed through more. This was nothing. That's what I told myself. But here's what I didn't admit in that moment. This wasn't pressure. It wasn't exhaustion. It was something deeper. Something I had been avoiding so well. I forgot it was even there. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to face it, not because I couldn't handle it, but because handling it might require me to become someone I don't recognize. So I stayed there, silent, composed, alone, waiting for the feeling to disappear. But it didn't. It just settled, like it found a place inside me. And that's when I realized this wasn't a moment. It was a signal. Something shifting underneath everything I built. And the part I couldn't shake, if I had made that call, if I had said one honest sentence instead of staying silent, something would have changed that night, not just in how I felt, but in who I was becoming. And I still don't know if that change would have saved me or undone me completely. I didn't lose her in one moment. I engineered distance like it was strategy, not obvious, never dramatic, no fights, no doors slammed, no final words you could point at and say, that's where it ended. It was cleaner than that. Controlled. It started small, a message I saw, and chose to answer later. Not because I was busy, because I wanted to feel in control of when I responded. A call I let ring once, twice, then stopped. Not rejection, just delay, enough to shift the rhythm. Enough to remind myself, I'm still the one setting the pace. At first it felt harmless, calculated, like adjusting a dial, not breaking a connection. But connection doesn't break loudly, it fades quietly, while you convince yourself everything is still intact. There was a night, I remember this clearly, rain against the windows, not heavy, just steady enough to fill the silence. I was at my desk, lights low, screen glowing in front of me. Her message came in, simple, direct. Are you okay? No pressure, no expectation, just presence. I stared at it longer than I should have, because that question, it wasn't about information, it was about access, an opening, and I knew exactly what answering it honestly would do. It would pull her closer. Too close. So I typed something safe. Yeah, just busy. I watched the words sit there before hitting send. Even I didn't believe them, but they worked. They always worked. Pattern interrupt. Distance isn't always about losing interest. Sometimes it's about maintaining an identity you're afraid to outgrow. She replied, calm, understanding, no confrontation, no push, and that's what made it worse, because she didn't resist the distance, she respected it. You'd think that would make things easier. It didn't. It removed the excuse. I couldn't tell myself she was demanding too much, or moving too fast. She wasn't. She was just there, consistent, real, and I was the one pulling away. Uncomfortable truth? It's easier to blame someone for leaving than to admit you trained them how to let go. I started noticing the shifts. Subtle. Her messages got shorter. Not cold. Just measured. She stopped asking certain questions. Stopped reaching into spaces I kept guarded. Not because she lost interest. Because she learned where not to go. And that realization, it didn't feel like relief. It felt like something slipping. There's a strange kind of loneliness that comes from being understood and still choosing distance. Because now you know. It's not them. It's you. I told myself I was protecting something. My focus, my routine, my independence, all the things that made me who I was. Because if I let her in completely, there would be variables I couldn't control, emotions I couldn't predict, reactions I couldn't manage, and I built my life on eliminating uncertainty. But here's the conflict I didn't want to face. The more I controlled the dynamic, the less real it became, and I could feel that, in the pauses, in the conversations that felt slightly off. Not wrong, just missing something. One evening, she was sitting across from me again, same low light, same quiet energy, but something had changed, not in her behavior, in her presence. She wasn't leaning in anymore, she wasn't searching, she was just sitting there, at ease, detached in a way I recognized. And that's when it hit me, she had adjusted. To me. Let me ask you something. What happens when someone stops trying to get closer to you? Not because they don't care, but because they've accepted the distance you created. Do you feel relieved, or do you feel replaced by your own walls? Because I didn't feel in control in that moment. I felt unnecessary, and that's not a feeling I'm used to. I realized something sitting there across from her. I hadn't been protecting myself from her. I had been protecting myself from what she could change in me. Because if she got too close, I wouldn't be the same. I wouldn't think the same, move the same, decide the same, and that version of me, the one I spent years building, might not survive that kind of honesty. So I kept doing what I knew, maintaining distance, staying measured, keeping parts of myself just out of reach, even when I felt the pull to close the gap, even when I knew I was the one creating it. And here's the part I didn't expect. She didn't fight it. She didn't demand more. She didn't try to break through. She just met me where I was and stopped trying to go further. That should have felt safe, predictable, controlled, but instead, It felt like something was quietly ending, without announcement, without conflict, just fading into something less. And I let it happen. Not because I wanted to lose her, but because I didn't know how to keep her, without losing the version of myself I thought I needed to be. So I stayed consistent in my inconsistency. Close enough to keep her. Distant enough to protect myself. Walking that line like it wouldn't eventually break. But lines like that always do. They don't snap all at once. They wear down. Slowly. Until one day, you realize you're standing on something that can't hold you anymore. And the worst part? By the time you feel it giving way, you're not the only one standing there. And I still can't tell if she stepped back because she saw it coming, or because I taught her that's what she was supposed to do. I told myself I was choosing freedom, but I was really choosing distance that no one could cross. It sounds clean when you say it like that, controlled, intentional, like a man who knows exactly what he wants. But that's the lie I got good at telling, because independence sounds powerful, loneliness sounds like failure, and I don't do failure. There was a night I went back to that same room, same low light, same silence waiting for me like it always does. But something felt different, not heavier, not louder, just emptier, like something had quietly been removed, and I didn't notice when it left. I walked in slower than usual, didn't drop my keys this time, held onto them for a second longer than I needed to, like letting go of them would confirm something I wasn't ready to admit. Her message thread was still there, unchanged, no dramatic ending, no closure, just a gradual thinning of words, until there was nothing left to say. I opened it anyway, scrolled, stopped, closed it again. Pattern interrupt. Sometimes the absence of a person doesn't hurt because they're gone. It hurts because you realize how long they were slowly leaving. I sat down, leaned forward, hands clasped. Same position as that night I almost called her, but this time, there was no decision to make. That window had passed, quietly, without asking me, and that's when the thought hit me, not sharp, not sudden, just undeniable. You didn't lose her. You outlasted her patience. That one stayed, because it wasn't dramatic enough to reject. It didn't accuse, it just sat there. Like truth does when you finally stop arguing with it. Uncomfortable truth, you can convince yourself you're in control, while slowly creating a situation where there's nothing left to control, and that's exactly what I did. I started replaying moments, not the big ones, the small ones, the messages I delayed, the honesty I softened, the time she opened a door, and I stood there, pretending not to see it. Each one felt insignificant at the time, strategic. Now, they looked like exits, and I had walked her to every single one. Let me ask you something. What's worse, losing someone suddenly, or realizing you had 100 chances to keep them and chose not to? Sit with that, because I didn't. Not until it was already too late. There's this strange kind of regret that doesn't come with chaos. No breakdown, no tears, just clarity. And clarity can be brutal, because now you see everything exactly as it was. No distortion, no justification, just a clean line between what you felt and what you showed. I told myself I wasn't ready, that timing mattered, that I had priorities, that I couldn't afford distraction, all logical, all reasonable, all incomplete, because the real reason I was afraid, not of her, of what loving her would require me to confront. Because she wasn't asking for effort, she was asking for presence, and presence doesn't let you hide. I built my life on staying one step ahead, thinking faster, moving smarter, controlling outcomes before they even form. But with her, there was no ahead. There was only now, and I didn't know how to live there. So I chose what I understood: distance, control, familiar patterns that kept me safe, even when I felt something inside me pushing against them, even when I knew I was choosing something smaller than what was possible. And now I sit in that same silence, but it doesn't feel neutral anymore. It feels earned, like a consequence I designed myself. I wonder sometimes if I had said it, just once. I'm not okay. Not polished, not controlled, just real. Would that have changed everything? Or would it have exposed something I wasn't ready to carry? That question doesn't leave. It lingers in the background of everything. Quiet, persistent, unanswered. And here's the part I don't say out loud. I don't know if I miss her, or if I miss the version of me that almost let her in. Because that version? He was close to something. Something honest. Something I've avoided for a long time. But here's what keeps me awake sometimes. What if that version of me only existed in that moment, and now that it's gone, I don't know if I can get back there, or worse, I don't know if I'll recognize it when it shows up again. Because the next time someone sees through me like she did, I won't have the excuse of not knowing what it costs to push them away, and that means the next choice I make won't be unconscious, it'll be deliberate. And I still don't know which version of me is going to show up when that moment comes, the one who protects everything he built, or the one who risks it for something he can't control.